Stand by to initiate release sequencer. On my mark. 5.
We're on express elevator to hell. Going down.
2. 1. Mark.
Hello, everyone. My name is Mark, a.k.a. Derringer. Today is Sunday, March 24th, and you are listening to episode 201 of the Instant Action Podcast, your weekly source for planet-side news and information. As always, I'm brought to you by great listeners like you via the Support the Show tab on instantactionpodcast.com. So first off, just a big thank you to everybody for listening to last week's show, episode 200, a huge milestone. I was tweeting about it all week, responding to emails about it all week and stuff like that. It was a really good feeling getting out episode 200 and doing 200 episodes of a podcast. I mean, that's an insanely long time. If you guys saw the PlanetSide 2 tweet at me, it was almost 4 years worth of podcasting. This May will be my 4th year podcasting on the Instant Action Podcast, which of course doesn't count all the time that I did on Reachcast 2, which we started that back in 2012. So again, just a really big milestone, and thank you to everybody who downloaded, everybody who listened, everybody who commented, everybody who sent me a thank you. Everybody who made other donations to the show. I caught the majority of you last week. I got one more guy to thank this week in housekeeping once we get to it. But now we're moving on to the next 200 episodes of the Instant Action Podcast. And with that, so what's in store for this week's show? Well, really, it's only one thing, and that's the huge March 20th PC game update and its accompanying hotfix. Because, I mean, let's be honest. We have the new EverQuest event with directives. We have the new carbines. We have new armor changes. We have new air changes, infantry changes. You know, basically, this is by far the biggest game update we've had since last August. And then, like I said, the obligatory, we screwed some stuff up on the 20th accidentally hotfix that I'm going to have to go over as well. So with that in mind, both those things are going to take up everything on this week's show. So strap in as we hot drop into another episode of the Instant Action Podcast. So you heard me, March 20th, PC game update, and stay tuned to the end to get the PS4 information regarding this. But everything I'm going to talk about right now is PC and PC only, unfortunately, for PS4 folks. But big thing, and this was kind of a surprise. I mean, we all knew EverQuest was turning 20 years old. I mean, there's been a bunch of tweets about this recently. I mean, if you follow Roxley on Twitter, you saw she got a sword for being a moderator or community manager for EverQuest. I mean, that's pretty badass. But yeah, EverQuest has turned 20 years old this month, and it's bleeding over into PlanetSide 2 because we got a great new event with a bunch of new directives going on right now as we speak. So from March 20th through March 31st, that's till the end of the month, obviously. And really, if you're listening to this, you basically have a week to finish this. There is a new EverQuest 20th directive line with some legendary loot added to it. Scattered throughout the continent are quote-unquote shinies that give you a little piece of history of EverQuest. Personally, I'm finding collecting shinies to be the biggest pain in the ass ever in my entire gameplay session of PlanetSide 2, and it makes me want to put a bullet in my head. But that being said, you can go out there and collect shinies and get those little glimpses. Like I said, it says glimpses, and it pops up a little pop-up on your screen and talks about something that happened in EverQuest. Seeing as how that I've only found 2 shinies in the week that this has been out. Has it even been a week? The 3 or 4 days that this has been out. Obviously, I have not gotten a lot of the little pop-ups to show. But if you do go and finish the 3rd tier of this, you're going to be awarded the Fate Stealer Dagger. It's a pretty cool looking dagger, if I do say so myself. And if you finish off the 4th tier, I should say that the 2nd tier rewards you with a basic implant pack. The 3rd tier awards you the Fate Stealer dagger. And if you finish the 4th tier, the Fate Stealer turns into the Nightshade dagger, which is a corrosive edged weapon that can damage heavy armor. And anybody who got that in the first few days knows that it was a little overpowered, and in the next topic I'll tell you how they fixed that. But yeah, new directive is out there, and I'll talk a little bit more about this as we get to the mailbag, because I had somebody ask a question about this, so I won't talk about shinies too much more right now. And instead we'll move on to the new carbines that have been introduced to PlanetSide 2. Now, I know I've talked about these because they've been on test for a little while, but now they are all on live, and you can actually go into the depot and buy the fully loaded bundles for all of these. And on the first day, I purchased the Horizon fully loaded bundle, and speaking of the Horizon, that is the Vano Sovereignties carbine. When you fire that from the hip, it fires a horizontal fan of 3 pellets. When you fire it from ADS or aiming down sights, it does a vertical pellet spread. It's kind of a little interesting weapon. I haven't used it enough to have a good, decent sized opinion of it yet, but it's not too bad using it the first time around, and I'll probably continue to keep using it. The NC got one called the MGRC-1 Charger. It uses a new magazine type that when you reload, overcharges the first few shots, which do increased damage. I did hear a lot of people complaining that they were getting lit up by the Charger, because clearly somebody running with a Charger is going to be reloading it constantly to get those first few shots that have a ton of increased damage. And the TR unlocked the MGC-1 Kindred. And the comments on this one is the Kindred was developed using a prototype spin-down mechanism that boosts the rate of fire each time the trigger is pulled and settles into a more steady rhythm the longer the weapon fires. So clearly the rate of fire is much higher every time you pull the trigger, so you want to burst with this weapon more than anything. And I heard a lot of people saying that they were also getting taken down quickly by Kindreds as well because of that spin-down mechanism. But again, new carbines in the game, and unfortunately I wish I hadn't completed my carbine directive on NC, otherwise I'd probably have more of a reason to go out and purchase the Charger at this time. Moving on from new events and new carbines, though, let's talk about the metagame a little, because the End of Continent precision strikes have been updated now to live. The damage over time area effect was reduced from 300 meters down to 50 meters. And the detonation area was also reduced from 150 to 100. And the goal here was to reduce the damage over time to let players redeploy from the zone more easily. What I'm afraid this is going to allow people to do is linger on a continent more easily as well. I'm of the opinion that the End of Continent precision strikes should just obliterate anybody who's not the faction that won the continent. If you want to be able to hang around and farm a continent for shinies or something like that, win the goddamn continent and then we can talk. So I'm not a fan of these changes. Like I said, I think everybody should be obliterated if you're not the winning faction. But that's my opinion and my opinion only. Next, moving on to the user interface, there is now a numeric vehicle health display option. And when you close the map during an active alert, it's also now going to play an animation that draws more attention to the alert timer. Going back to the vehicle health display option, I've got that one on. I think it must be on by default now, because now I see all my vehicles have a plus and then a number next to them with all their health on it. It's kind of a little interesting addition to it. And also that closing the map thing certainly draws more attention to the alert timer itself. But here's the big changes, and probably the most controversial changes right now that people are talking about, and this is the max weapon adjustment changes that went live. And really, more than anything, these max weapon adjustments are a huge nerf to the new conglomerate maxes. And even as the description says, their close combat strength, close quarters combat strength has been a bit of a sore spot. Anything that has an indoor capture point, shotguns really have kind of an overwhelming advantage a lot of times. So as a result, every NC Max shotgun has been updated in this game update. So let's talk about what those changes are now that they are on live. So the cone of fire first has been standardized and buffed heavily across all of them. The bloom is now 0.5, hip fire is 0, standing hit fire is 0, moving cone of fire is now 0.5, crouching is 0, crouch walking is 0.25. The maximum hip fire cone of fire of the movement states above is now 1. Slug ammunition, all of that you had purchased has been removed and refunded, and the short and long reloads have been standardized for these weapons, so hitting a long reload is no longer possible, and that's across every shotgun weapon for NC Maxes. Now let's talk about the individual ones. Let's start with the scatter cannon. Its damage range is now 125 at 8 meters to 35 at 20 meters. It's a bit of a reduction. Pellet shot per shot is now 5 from 6. The refire rate is 500 milliseconds, up from 333. Ammo capacity was increased up to 72 though, but now both the short and long reloads are at 3 seconds. Sorry, not 30 seconds. The pellet spread was changed from 3 down to 2, and the extended magazine size was reduced from 4 to 2. The dev notes on this is that the scatter cannon will retain that one-click body shot on infantry targets without headshots, but it now comes at a higher cost through rate of fire penalties and a slimmer damage margin to secure a one-shot kill. Moving on to the Matic, its damage range was changed to 100 at 15 meters to 75 at 50 meters. It used to be 100 at 15 and 70 at 30 meters. The pellets per shot was reduced to 3. The magazine size was increased to 8. The ammo capacity was also increased to 72, but now both the short and long reload are 3.25 seconds. The pellet spread was reduced to 1.75, and the extended magazine size from 4 down to 2. The dev note on this one is the most popular NC Max shotgun with the fewest drawbacks. I agree. This is the shotgun that I used 100% of the time with slugs and now have to reconsider. So they've pushed the Matic a bit further into its mid-range niche by increasing the reliance on accurate aim while reducing its versatility at close range. Pre-nerf Matic, I miss you dearly. I wish you would come back to me. Moving on to the Hacksaw. Its damage was changed to 75 at 8 meters to 25 at 15 meters, which is kind of a huge change because it used to be 125 at 8 meters. Pellets per shot went down to 5, magazine size increased to 8, ammo capacity increased to 72. Short and long reloads are now both 3.5 seconds, pellet spread down to 3, and the extended magazine size down to 2. The dev note on this one is that Hacksaw still retains the highest damage per second of all shotguns, while feeling a bit better to use thanks to the cone of fire and pellet spread adjustments. Still, it's been nerfed. Next, the Grinder, which was my second favorite. The damage range on this one was changed to 50 at 8 meters to 20 at 20 meters, which is also a big reduction because it used to be 130 at 8 and 50 at 18. Its rate of refire rate was bumped up to 500 milliseconds. Pellets per shot increased to 10, magazine size increased to 12, ammo capacity increased to 72, and both its short and long reloads are now 4 seconds, and they have changed it so that it is now an automatic weapon. Now, the dev note on this is that despite being the mag size shotgun alternative, it didn't have enough of an identity to warrant using it over most other options. So they've moved it to a slow, chunky suppression weapon with a high uptime and room clearing capabilities. I think this is the one that I'm going to be playing around with a little bit more now that my beloved Matic just doesn't feel as good as it used to. So there's your 4 different NC Max shotguns. Again, remember, if you had slugs on any of these, you don't have slugs anymore. Slugs are now gone from the game for these, so you're going to have to deal with pellet spread. and stuff like that going forward. And I think we just kind of got to deal with it as NC players. Now, this has spawned a whole lot of, crying NC players and cheering TR and VS players, or at least the perception that that's what's going on. But honestly, I haven't seen too many NC players crying about these nerfs. I think a lot of them dislike them, but I think that we're dealing with them. I'd like to give it at least a month before I start to see people really crying for some of these changes to come back. I don't know. Granted, I didn't play a lot of Max within the game to begin with. You guys heard last week, I'm an engineer main. I mean, I was repairing Maxes nonstop, but I don't use them a heck of a lot. So I don't think it's going to affect my gameplay too much for these changes, but I'd really like to see, a month from now, what the consensus is when these Maxes are dealing with other Maxes and other infantry and stuff like that. But we're going to have to kind of play the waiting game on this right now to see if this was the correct move to make. Now, the VS and TR Maxes weren't left unchanged either. They do feel that they're in pretty good spots, but there are a few underused weapons. The first for VS is the Quasar. It had its short reload reduced to 2 seconds, long reload reduced to 2.7 seconds, standing cone of fire reduced to 1.5, moving to 2, crouching to 1.25, and crouch walking to 1.5. Again, they're all reductions to its cone of fire. The changes here move the Quasar into a bit more of a competitive alternative to the Blue Shifter Nebulas and sits somewhere between them in terms of accuracy and damage output. I'm still going to use my Blue Shifts nonstop, not going to lie. Next, the Cosmos had some changes. Its short reload changed to 2.25, long to 3. Headshot multiplier reduced from 2 to 1.2. Projectile velocity reduced to 400. Meanwhile, its projectile size and visuals were both increased and modified. And this is moving it in more toward a higher ammo capacity Quasar with an unstable ammunition style weapon, with less emphasis on headshots and more about consistent damage over time. Next, for the TR, the M1 Heavy Cycler got some changes as well. First, the short reload got reduced to 2.2 seconds, standing cone of fire reduced to 1.75, and the moving cone of fire down to 2.25, crouch walking cone of fire down to 1.75. They felt that this was essentially an inferior mutilator with no real reason to use it if you had any other arsenal option unlocked. They didn't want to change the weapon too much, so they just increased its reload speed and initial accuracy to give it a more solid place within the arsenal itself. So I guess we'll see if more people are going to start using the Heavy Cycler or not. Also for the Max, the Lockdown got some changes to it. It now renders the Max immune to being moved by knockback-based attacks like orbital strikes or tank mines. It does not alter the behavior of being bumped by a vehicle or thrown by a jump pad, things like that. So there's your Max changes all rolled up there. Again, we're going to have to wait a little while to see what the fallout for those NC Max changes are ultimately within the game. Next, we also had quite a few vehicle adjustments. Like I said at the beginning of the show, this was probably the biggest patch or game update that we've had for PlanetSide 2 since August. And when I say August, we're talking about the August 16th update, which had stuff changes to the unstable warp gates, changing warp gates, aerial anomalies. They added the gaining ground event, made some changes to joint combat, made squad improvement changes. They added the new construction directive and things like that. And with the new rewards, they redid the second round of implants for the implant pool. They added crafting of implants. They made adjustments to a whole bunch of other ones as well. They added some other vehicle changes, the Galaxy Valkyrie changes, a bunch of lightning and heat hash AP changes. Again, that August update was just about as big as this one. So that tells you it's been a long time since they've thrown a huge update like this at us. But back to the current one, we did get a new weapon for ESFs, and this is the M202 Worm, spelled W-Y-R-M, like a baby dragon, a small dragon. It's an ESF secondary weapon that fires a hard-hitting, slow-moving rounds at a low rate of fire. Now, the dev note for this is that functionally the Worm is supposed to be a more sustained fire alternative to air-to-air lock-on weaponry for hunting large air targets, and has the versatility to defend against enemy ESFs if the user's aim and prediction are good enough. Again, this is clearly the new weapon of choice to be hunting enemy galaxies with, potentially enemy liberators that are kind of just standing over a place, not really moving around. I think they're really tough to use against enemy ESFs. Of course, that could mean somebody's going to put together a video of them shooting down enemy ESFs with the Worm, but there is that goal for people listening to the show. But again, new weapon for ESFs. They also made some changes to the air-to-air lock-on missiles for the ESFs. They've reduced the maneuverabilities of them, but they've also changed the lock-on time from 2 to 1.5 seconds. Reload time bumped up to 6 seconds. The lock-on speed rank 5 cost was reduced to 500 certs, and the lock-on speed cert line benefit went from 5, 10, 15, 20 to 5, 7, 9, and 10% speed difference. They also changed the lock-on range rank 5 cert cost also from 1,000 down to 500. Along with doing that, the benefit changed to a flat percentage of 5, 7, 8, 9, 10%. Also, the reload speed cert line cost has now changed from 100, changed to 100, 150, 200, 400, 500. So definitely reduced the cost for all of those. Now, the dev notes on this is the changes are geared toward making air-to-air missiles more easily dodgeable by ESFs, while making it difficult but possible for larger air vehicles to avoid as well. The faster base lock-on speed alongside the longer reload time should make them a bit easier to use regardless of attachment type, while lowering the maximum damage over time these weapons can put out. The lock-on speed benefit was reduced so that other options receive more consideration, and they've also touched some of the cert cost to make the weapon attachments more reachable for lower-level players. It feels to me like they're trying to lower that barrier of entry for new flyers to use air-to-air lock-on missiles against other ESFs, but it still feels like the better pilots are going to be able to maneuver out of lock-on missiles that are targeting them. Moving to the ground, though, the Prowler, Magrider, and Vanguard had some changes done to them. They had their tank shell resistance changed from 0 to -50, and their rear armor from -100 to -50. Now, the dev note on this is that the original goal of increasing survivability for more casual or inexperienced players was well-intentioned. Tank v tank combat became too much of a slugfest to be enjoyable for veterans. This change is a major swing back towards shorter tank v tank time to kill values to bring back some of the tense, fast-paced gameplay. We'll continue to pursue avenues for easing less experienced players into the tank game, but it will no longer come at the cost of this style of gameplay. Here are some examples of the impacts of these changes below. Shots to kill for a Magrider AP to a Prowler from the front. As of the update, it's now 4 to burn, 5 to kill. Shots to kill for Magrider AP to Prowler from the rear. It's now a flat 3 to kill from 4. Shots for an AP Magrider to a Lightning from the front. 3 to burning, 4 to kill. Shots to kill for a Magrider AP to a Lightning to the rear. It used to be 3 to kill. Now it's 2 burning, 3 to kill. So not too much of a change there. Sunderers and Ants also got in on this tank shell resistance change, but instead of from 0 to -50, they're 0 to -20. And these changes equate to roughly 1 less shot to kill from their live versions. This brings the expectations to destroy those vehicles a bit closer to that of tank-to-tank combat, while still allowing them to remain more tanky as wheeled support vehicles. Honestly, I wish the Sunderer would still be more resistant to tank shells, because I think they need to survive a lot longer. Or if anything, make a moving Sunderer have the -20, but make a deployed Sunderer have still 0. I'd like to see the deployed Sunderers last a bit longer. Again, just my personal opinion on that. The Sunderer's deploy shield also had an update, so while the shield is active, the vehicle no longer receives additional damage to tank shells. This is the resist type above. So what that does is it nullifies the tank shell resistance adjustment above for deployed shield Sunderers whose shield is currently active. It's like I was saying, but not everybody has deploy shield available out there. I just wish all Sunderers, even a fresh brand new one rolled out, would be just as resistant. But at least this is some sort of a compromise. Moving on to the Harasser, they also had their tank shell resistance change from -50 to -20. And also the engineers in the rumble seat now repair 50% of their normal repair per second value instead of 30%. And obviously this is all to make the Harasser survive a little bit longer. So with the main battle tanks and lightnings receiving less damage from the rear, they decided to reduce some of the vehicle's survivability against those targets. So they want Harassers to be flanking MBTs and lightnings. But in most cases, this change increases the number of shots to kill for a composite armor Harasser by 1 and prevents them from falling into a critical state as they normally would have without their composite armor. The additional rumble seat repair rate should also help boost the vehicle's overall survivability mid-fight, though ultimately the role of the Harasser continues to be to pick off wounded targets and engage in hit-and-run gameplay. And I do think those changes definitely play into that style for the Harasser. Moving back to the air, let's talk about Liberator nose guns, specifically the Tank Buster and the Vector. Aiming with them no longer allows you to swivel the turret. The dev notes is that was a common complaint, and you really can't maneuver the Liberator well while aiming as a result. So they've made those changes. Also for the Tank Buster, its projectile velocity was increased to 400. And they've done that to help pilots engage from slightly further distances and increase the consistency of landing shots on fast-moving targets. Moving to the Valkyrie, its VLG, the nose gun, its direct damage was increased to 575. The projectile lifespan was reduced to 3 seconds, and the max velocity was increased to 150. They also heavily modified the handling characteristics to provide more controllability. The goal was to increase the handling and damage output to help it push into an effective role against heavy armor specifically. The Hellion, also a Valkyrie nose gun, has its magazine size increased to 60, max damage increased to 200. The goal there was to reignite its role as a more risky close quarters anti-vehicle option. Moving back to the Sunderer, the Walker had its refire rate reduced to 100 milliseconds. And what this does is it puts the anti-air refire rate in line with the main battle tank Harasser and the Ant variants, while having a shorter fall off. Now, this alongside some Ranger changes, which I'm going to talk about next, should make the Walker a more considered choice within the current Ranger meta. So Ranger, and this is for all vehicles, not just the Sunderer, it had its magazine size reduced to 60, ammo capacity reduced to 780. They're calling this a soft nerf. It doesn't do much to change the overall power of the weapon, but it provides more opportunities for air vehicles to escape if the gunner isn't landing their shots. Moving back to the Liberator, its resistance to the Walker was changed from 75 to 72.5. And what it does is it moves the Walker's damage output against Liberators a bit closer to the Ranger without usurping its role at closer distances. Moving back to main battle tanks and lightnings, flanker armor is now providing resistance to infantry launchers and air-to-ground warheads. And the percentage at each rank is 10, 15, 18, and 20%, and that's an increase. The dev notes on this is that the flanker armor was hard to justify using, giving other alternatives. The adjustments here are intended to make flanker armor more useful in more situations, while making each rank more new player friendly to cert into as well. Next, fire suppression had changes, and this affects all vehicles. They've now standardized the healing for all ranks of its vehicles. For any non-ESF, it now heals 15% of the vehicle's maximum health over 5 seconds, starting at rank 1. And for ESFs, it now heals 25% of a vehicle's maximum health over 5 seconds, starting at rank 1. Now, previously, most vehicles would heal 12% of their health over 5 seconds, with ESFs being the exception. Now, while this doesn't necessarily need the boost in popularity, they refined the values a bit and made the ability more useful for players picking it up at lower levels. Interesting changes to fire suppression. I think everyone I know uses fire suppression for the most part. Moving on to the Gate Shield Diffuser. This is on the Flash, the Harasser, and the Sunderer. It's now going to prevent most types of collision damage. And instead, also now the duration is at 15 seconds at all ranks. The cooldown from 60 seconds at all ranks was reduced now to 55, 50, 47, and 45 seconds. And they felt that this is a fun little change to give it more function from an early level. And open up some new options for players who enjoy ramming other vehicles. And they put in parentheses, or want to survive being rammed by other vehicles. So clearly, if a vehicle is coming right at you, you can pop your Gate Shield Diffuser and maybe survive that ram now. Decoy flares for all air vehicles also got changed. Their cooldown was changed to 35, 30, 27, and 25 seconds on its ranks. The duration was changed from 5 seconds to 8 seconds, and all their descriptions have been updated. Now, these changes are geared towards helping newer players make use of the ability without requiring the later levels of the ability. They also feel that the duration increase will provide some additional usefulness in air combat, especially while fleeing hostile territory, without being so much of an increase that air-to-ground vehicles get free reign on infantry combat areas. Next, the Barrage Prowler ability got some updates to it. They redid the particle effects. They changed the cooldown to be reduced by 10 seconds at all ranks. And clearly that the placeholder visuals are gone, and the good new visuals they have are now there. And it's available at more ranks itself with that cooldown reduction. Now, the final vehicle change would be the Wraith Cloak for the Flash. Its cooldown was changed from 5 to 3 seconds, and its initial energy cost from 25 down to 10, which all should help return some of the Wraith Cloak's ease of use to the vehicle game. And there's all your vehicle changes, but now it's on to infantry adjustments because they weren't forgotten either. Starting with the anti-vehicle grenade for heavy assaults, the inner blast radius was increased to 1.5 meters, and the armor penetration bonus was changed to 100%. And what these do are provide a modest damage boost against armor vehicle targets and make them more consistent damage in other situations. For the engineer, the AV Mana Turret, the damage resistance type for this was changed from infantry rocket launchers to tank shell, and they also adjusted the explosion visuals to better match the blast radius of the weapon itself. And what this does is give it back some of its earlier bite versus heavily armored ground vehicles without modifying the time to kill too much anywhere else. Also for the engineer, its hard light barrier got some changes. Its tank cannon resistance went from 0 to minus 400, heavy machine gun to 0, C4 to minus 100, tank mine resistance to minus 50, infantry rocket to minus 50, and air-to-ground warhead resistance to minus 400. And they've just done a once-over to put it more in line with the amount of damage you'd expect it to take from heavy ordnance, so it's going to be destroyed a lot easier. Finally, miscellaneous fixes, changes, and addition. The only real one of note is that vehicle smoke screens should no longer be blinding during certain times of the day, and they've made some other additional adjustments to the visuals themselves. And there's your entire PC game update. And as I said at the end, I would talk about PS4, because Nick did go to Twitter and say that they are putting together a PS4 patch with the new carbines and all of those same balance changes that went to PC. They're expecting an ETA sometime early this week, but they are not going to be adding the EverQuest event to the PS4. Sorry, PS4 players. But there is everything regarding that game update. And with that, I've brought Romus back again this week. I'm sorry to you, Romus, for cutting you out last week. I was recording early and I let you know. So he's back again this week, guys. Don't worry, with some interesting news on how to deal with one of everyone's favorite game annoyances. Take it away, Romus.
All right, Scrublord, something for you to learn. You can hide inside one of those magical super boxes in a base. You can hide in the ground. You can hide in all sorts of places. But let me tell you someplace you can't hide. From my knife. If you've been encountering as many people breaking the laws of physics as I have, you will soon discover that trying to hold a point when someone is clipped inside a computer box is certainly difficult. However, while hiding inside those computer boxes, or the side of a mountain, you can fix that problem with a chain blade. Or if you're one of them weirdos, a vibro knife. Walk right up, stick it right in, but I generally recommend between the 4th and 5th ribs. That's how you deal with the hackers, that's how I deal with the hackers, and that's a problem solved. Back to you, Derringer.
Good info as always, Romus. Thanks for that. I'm going to break out my knife a bit more if I see somebody clipping out of the world based on that. I didn't know that the knife could still get them through whatever thing that they're stuck in, so definitely good info. With that, though, let's move on to the March 21st PC hotfix. And yes, at the beginning of the show, I said this is the, we fucked some stuff up. Here's our obligatory hotfix to come in. And it's just a few quick little things. So first, the worm now receives kill medals. It wasn't. It also now contributes to the directive progress for the Scythe Reaver and Mosquito directives, because it wasn't. The new Empire carbines are all now receiving kill medals, because they weren't. They also all count towards the generic carbine kill directives, because just like the worm, those weren't. The Nightshade had its resist type changed. It was originally the anti-materiel rifle, so the archer, and it's been changed to the 4, which is the heavy machine gun, because anybody who was using it knew you could just absolutely shred enemy heavy armor. You shouldn't have been able to. Somebody put a video out there where they killed their harasser within like 5 or 6 knife slashes, and the first day I was playing, there was a infiltrator killing a sunderer with just a bunch of slashes to it, when it should take a hell of a lot longer than that. Also, the Nightshade and Fate Stealer should now count toward any generic melee kill directives. They also hid the unequipable kinetic shielding skill line from the Lightning cert list. Clearly, this is something that we might be getting in the future, something they're working on for the Lightning that wasn't supposed to make it to live. EverQuest lore pop-ups now will clear when players reach a different UI screen, such as opening the map, because these things seem to hang around for a long time before they disappear, so good to know that you can just open another UI screen to make them go away. Also, the Valkyrie's VLG nose gun is no longer reloading more quickly while aiming through optics. Clearly, it shouldn't have been. And finally, they fixed various detached particle effects and broken audio, including infiltrator cloaking sounds on live. So there it is. There's your hot fix for the things that they broke. The biggest one, obviously, was the Nightshade. And I told you why that was such a big change, because the video is hilarious. I was like, holy crap, I got to get myself this Nightshade if it's really going to do that much damage. But it was so obvious that it was a mistake, and I'm glad they got to it pretty quickly. But with that, let's move on to housekeeping this week, because I got a few things to talk about.
Housekeeping. Housekeeping.
Come back later, please.
Housekeeping.
Not now.
Housekeeping.
Go away.
I coming anyway?
First bit of housekeeping, I want to talk about the email I got from Kalu, who made a donation to the show itself. He also put a little note that said, congrats on the 200th show, mate. Kalu, thank you very much, and thank you for being a listener and making that donation. I really, really, really appreciate it. I also got an email from Matt9, and he writes, congrats on 200 episodes, and thanks for always keeping me up on the happenings on Araxis. A big patch came out this week. I have limited time for gaming, so in PS2 I play exclusively NC in a small outfit. My outfit is a bit frustrated as the NC maxes were heavily nerfed, most say too much so. And the other faction received new abilities with their MBTs, whereas the NC got nothing. But I also know that when you only play one faction, it's difficult to see how things are balanced. It's very easy to think everything is a nerf on you and a buff to the other factions. I've played a lot of NC, but you have also played the other faction as well. So I would appreciate your take on this new patch and the persecution of the NC. Any thoughts? Thanks for all the great shows. I look forward to the next 100 and the next 100 after that. So, Matt and I do think that they might have been a little too heavy-handed on the NC Max's nerf, but we're going to have to see what happens. And in the past, and I think it's probably many, many years ago at this point, Rel used to drop some little bits of knowledge on how many kills happened with X Max and how many kills happened with that Max or things like that. So I'm really curious to see if there's a huge fall off in the number of deaths to NC Maxes after this change. I'd love to see Rel throw out a graphic, sometime this week saying that there's no change from one to the next, or it's more in line where they expect it to be. Because I think NC was by far the one killing the most enemy players compared to the other two. But again, we're going to have to see how it is. I do think, though, in Max v Max combat, the NC Max got the short end of the stick on this one, and I don't know what they're going to do to change that. As for the main battle tanks, I think the Vanguard is in a good place right now in that it didn't need any changes, and really the MBT changes you're talking about are the strafing, and for the Mag Rider, and also the ability, the Mag Burner ability. But everybody used Mag Burner already, so it's really not much of a difference. The change to the TR one is that barrage ability, but I still don't see a lot of people using that barrage ability. The people using barrage are the one that are sitting on hilltops using Hesh, farming points, and a Vanguard is going to make short work of those easily because they're stuck in a position. So I'm not sure that it's too much NC persecution. Sure, it was a lot of NC nerfs, but I don't know it was a huge bit of persecution. So hopefully that answers your question on what my thoughts are on it. Moving on, though, I also got an email from Hybrid, and Hybrid said, Derringer, congrats on 200 shows, a great milestone for a one-man show. I just wanted to get your opinion on the EverQuest event and your thoughts on this Reddit thread if you haven't covered it already in the show. And he gives me a post that's the Dear Devs about any event directive with searching anything. And then he also says, keep up the good work. So I didn't cover this in the show because, like I said, I got an email about it. And this was a complaint that someone put out to just stop putting in events with a directive where you need to search anything. Because as this person puts it, instead of playing the game, you're forcing players to search some shit most of the time alone. And I tend to agree with this. Do I think that this is something different? Sure. Hunting shinies is annoying as hell, though. It's a cool little different thing within the game, and it fits within the EverQuest lore, because I guess I never played EverQuest, I'm sorry. There were shinies within the game itself that you could collect, but to get these things, you need to actually go up to them, find them, and then you have to press E to collect them when you're near them, and finding them is not easy. Every location that people have already found them to spawn is camped constantly. There's enemy ESFs hunting nonstop, killing anything and anybody getting near shinies. The only time I've been able to find these is very early in the morning when not a lot of people are playing. That's been my experience with it, which makes me wish that instead of what they did by putting shinies out there, and I hear Drew is the one that did this, and from the shinies that I've found, Drew has put these things in pretty cool places, so I can't fault him for that. But like this person on Reddit, and his name's Usever, like he says, a lot of players are now playing alone. And they're just flying around the map or driving around the map all by themselves, not contributing to the game at all, just trying to unlock this knife. In my opinion, I think this would have been a much better directive if they made shinies randomly drop when you killed an enemy player. Just hear me out on that one, because I think that would have been much, much cooler. Sure, the possibility of you getting it if it drops is probably low, because maybe one of their friendly is going to actually pick it up because they're closer to them. But if you're fighting somebody one-on-one, as an example, and all of a sudden you kill them and they drop a shiny, tell me how cool that would have been. You'd be like, holy crap. And we'd see a ton of videos on how cool that is. But I can imagine a huge battle going back and forth that random shinies just appear. It would help a lot of people get through these directives much faster. I mean, like for me, as an example, I'm stuck on the second tier on all of these because they require you to do shinies. You can only do 2 non-shiny related ones in order to progress on the tier. So I had to stop and spend time hunting shinies just to move my way along the tier itself. And I don't really like that. And I don't think a lot of other players really like that either. So I know this is just one thing that we're getting. I guarantee we're never going to see this directive again. This event's never going to show up again because it's a 20-year thing. They're not going to do this annually on EverQuest's anniversary because 20 years is a huge anniversary. Next year, 21 is not a huge anniversary that you do something like this. So I don't think they're going to rework it for us, and that's just kind of the way it is. So I do kind of agree somewhat with this Reddit post that Hybrid brought to my attention for this week's show, and I hope that helps. I hope that answers everything and what I think about it, Hybrid. All right, that's going to be it for this week's show. As always, how can you get in touch with me or the show, though? First stop should be my website, www.instantactionpodcast.com. And you can visit that support the show link and help me out any way you can. You can also email me, like both Matt 9 and Hybrid did, at instantactionshow@gmail.com. You can also call me and leave me a voicemail, 347-4VM-4PS2. Those digits are 347-486-4772. And you can also follow the show on Twitter at InstActPodcast. But in closing, if you've enjoyed the show, please leave me a review on your podcast listening avenue of choice, whether it's iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, or anywhere else. Also, feel free to tell your friends and outfit mates about the show. And finally, thanks for listening, and keep spamming that Join Combat, formerly known as Instant Action button. Derringer out.
Get your arms combined.